Sometimes when kids are young, they have a hard time making friends. So imagine a new kid in school, it's a bit awkward for him, and one of the fellow students approaches and says, let's be friends. Today after school, I'm going home, I'm going to pass the candy store, and I'm going to buy candy, and, I'll share some of the candy with you. How's that? Great idea, let's be friends. So of course, the young boy is anxious for a friend, and he accepts the deal, and on the way home, they stop at the corner 7-Eleven, and they're in the candy section. Imagine, they're looking at all this candy, jelly beans, candy bars, the Snickers. One of my favorites was the Reese's peanut butter cups. Imagine a young boy seeing all this candy that is overwhelmed with all this amazing things. And so when he's all excited and all anxious for the candy he's going to eat, so the friend says, okay, which is the one you want? Which is your favorite? That's one you like? Okay, grab it. We'll grab that one and we'll take it. So he says, wait a minute. Uh-oh. I forgot my money. What are we going to do now? You know what? No one's here. No one's looking. Grab it quick and we'll run. So, of course, the boy in the situation is already, so much confused from all this candy, and he's anticipating the candy. So without thinking, the boy grabs the candy and they both run out together. Now, of course, the worker catches in the corner of his eye some commotion, some running, and he realizes what happened. Of course, the kid stole some candy. So he runs after the kids and grabs them and catches them. And what's the first thing that boy that started this whole thing about inviting him for candy, what's the first thing he's going to say? He tells the worker, he did it. He's the one that stole the candy, not me. Now, this story is really an analogy for the real enemy that we face in this world, the ancient enemy, the Nachash, the Yetzer Hara, that comes to all of us to try to lure us into sin, to make us, fall. That's his job. So that's what the story is really all about. The Gemara in Kedushin talks about the Yetzer Hara, actually tells us that the Yetzer Hara and the Malach HaMavet and the Mikatreg is all one entity. This means that the evil inclination, who has the power and the ability and permission to come and try to trick us and seduce us, luring us into the temptation of sin, is the same entity that in heaven prosecutes us for that very sin. And ultimately is the angel of death who comes to take our soul, which is also connected with sin, because we know that it's from the first sin that the whole idea of death exists in the world. Rav Chaim of Volozhin brings a tremendous question that he has on the whole concept of the Yetzer Hara in his Perush on Pirkei Avot, Ruach Chaim. He asks over there like this: we know that God, in essence, is kind. The whole reason he created the world was to be kind and to be giving to us. So in this case, how come God seems to be a bit overly cruel? It's not fair to let the same entity that is responsible to some degree by tricking you and tempting you and luring you into the sin. Why should he also be the one to put on his righteous suit in heaven and be accusing you? How could you sin? You did this, you did that. It's not fair that the same person that's your partner in crime, so to speak, is then your prosecutor for that crime. So he answers a very interesting answer. This answer is according to more a Kabbalistic concept, but he answers like this. He says, really, we have to appreciate and understand that everything comes from God, and everything is ultimately for our good. With that in mind, we can begin to understand that, in essence, according to the spiritual world above, the concept of evil is actually within the realm of holiness, which may not seem to make sense. How can evil be in holiness? Holiness and evil are the two opposites. So he explains in the shoresh, in the root and essence of where it all begins, in this highest place in heaven. So holiness and evil are together. For this, we have an analogy from the Zohar that really compares the evil inclination to a woman that lives in a kingdom, and the king comes and says, can you do for me a service? I want you to tempt my only son, the prince, and I want to see if he's going to be able to withstand the temptation and be true to the values that I taught him, or if he's going to fall to the temptation and act in a way that's not appropriate. So now this woman is in an interesting situation. I mean, she's loyal to her king and she must do what her king said. But we have to also know that she wants ultimately the king to be happy. And of course, the king's not going to be happy if the prince fails. So she herself doesn't want the prince to fail, but at the same time, she has to do a real job in tempting him. So unfortunately, the way the story goes, as we know it, this is a mashal for the Chet Eitz Hadat, the sin of the tree of knowledge. So the prince failed the test. And of course, mankind ultimately fell to the temptation of sin. But the essence of the force that brings sin about is really doing what Hashem said. It's really an angel and a servant of Hashem as well. So he explains that this is all in its source, while it's still in the realm of holiness. When this descends, this evil force, so to speak, it descends level by level by level. So when it reaches the lower world, it becomes pure evil and is absolutely negative. But in its source, it's actually positive in essence. He further explains that this is hinted to in the story when Esav is killed. We know that after Yaakov died, Esav came to stop him from being buried in Marat HaMachpelah, the holy place where all of the Avot are buried, and of course Adam as well. So what happened? So one of the descendants of Yaakov that couldn't hear comes and just says, how come this Esav is stopping my grandfather from being buried? And he chops his head off, and his head rolls into Marat HaMachpelah. Rav Chaim of Volozhin explains that this is very symbolic. It's not just a crazy story that Esav's head is chopped off and rolled into the holy place of Marat HaMachpelah. He explains that this all shows us and teaches us that evil, which is what Esav represented, in its shoresh, meaning the head of evil, belongs in a holy place because its root is in holiness above. It's only the bottom part that's chopped off and left outside. So too with the Yetzer Hara. The Chazal tell us, the rabbis explain that when Mashiach comes, God is going to slaughter, shecht, the evil inclination. So the Rav Chaim explains that what it really means is God's going to separate the head, which is the source, which is positive, from the rest and get rid of the rest, but the head will remain. And that's how he answers our original question. How is it fair for the same entity to be a partner in crime and at the same time be the accuser of that crime? So in essence, it's not really fully the same entity. The lower level of the entity is bad and will be eliminated and will no longer exist in the future, but the higher entity will continue to exist in the future. With this, we can appreciate really the story of this woman that did what the king said. Once the son fails the test, so beside the son being banished from the king's palace, so who else can't show their face in the king's palace? Of course, this woman that was only doing what she was asked for by her king, she also can't show her face because when the king will see her, he'll remember that his son is kicked out. So it's interesting. It's ultimately, in the end, when the son overcomes the challenge and does tshuva, he repents and comes back on a higher level. So it's interesting, when he comes back, you know who else comes back? So too this woman can come back. Because while he failed, she couldn't show her face. But once he succeeds and overcomes and comes to an even higher level through tshuva, like the rabbis explained to us, that when you do tshuva, you can rise to a higher level than even a tzaddik, so she can also come back. With this interesting point at the end, we can really appreciate a difficult teaching from the rabbis. The rabbis say that when a person does tshuva, not only does he come back, but he takes the sin itself, if he does tshuva on a high enough level, and transforms that sin also into merit, also into like a mitzvah, and he gets paid for even the sin. So the simple meaning is that since the sin is what ultimately propelled you to this higher level, so it's part of the ultimate good result. So you get rewarded for that part as well. But we can also explain a little bit differently like this. When we say that the zdonot, na'aseh kezichuyot, the purposeful sin becomes like a merit, so let's look at the story. Who really acted on purpose? Was the man, the prince, acting on purpose? No. He was tricked, he was seduced, his desires overcame him, and he, against his inner will, against his real will, fell to the sin. But we don't say that he did it 100% on purpose, but the woman was acting 100% on purpose, because she was actually doing what the king said to do. So the seducer is actually doing the act on purpose in this case. So let's look at that Ma'amer Chazal again. When we say that the willful act becomes a merit, we could actually also be hinting to her willful act. Meaning that when she willfully tries to trick the son, so she's in trouble for a while. But once the son does tshuva and rises to a higher level, so then her willful act also becomes a merit, because she did what her king asked her to do. And that's a way to appreciate why the higher level of this Yetzer Hara that's rooted in Kedusha is actually good and actually will be able to stay when Mashiach comes. That part will still exist.